Welcome back, everyone. We're here live once again for the NBA Finals Game 3. We're talking NBA Showdown, DFS slates on FanDuel and DraftKings. Heat versus the Nuggets. Series tied up at 1-1. Welcome. I'm Brian Jester, co-founder of Occupy Fantasy, joined once again. The people wanted him, so he's back. It is Chuck Silver, our lead NBA analyst at Occupy Fantasy. Chuck, what's up, man? What did you think of Game 2? Was anything surprising, whether it be the outcome of the game, maybe some player usage, player performance?
I wouldn't say anything was too surprising. Kevin Love did get 22 minutes. We weren't sure if he was going to play closer to 12 or closer to 20. He got closer to 20. He was doing pretty well. Like if you look at his stat line, he didn't do too well on the box score, but his impact on the game was pretty big if you were watching the game. And then Jokic is Jokic. Jimmy is still a little bit hobbled, but I don't really want to hold that against him when I'm making my lineups today. And then everything else is pretty much what we've been talking about. Nothing was too weird. Christian Brown did get a few extra minutes, but he was playing really well. I wouldn't expect that to hold up unless he comes in playing like an all-star like he did in the first couple minutes last game.
Which, unfortunately, we don't have Jayhawk on the stream. Jayhawk, one of our other NBA analysts, big Christian Brown fan, so I'm sure he would disagree that Christian Brown can play that type at that level for an extended minute. So here's what we'll do. We're here for 15, 20 minutes or so. You guys will drive the show. If you have questions, we are live. Throw them in the live chat box here on YouTube. Chuck and I, mostly Chuck, will answer the questions that you have about tonight's game. We'll talk some lineup construction, some ownership, maybe some angles for tournaments for Game 3. So until we get any questions, Chuck, let's go into it. Let's talk about Kevin Love first and foremost. When you and I talked before Game 2 on Sunday, we got the news maybe a half an hour before we went live that Kevin Love was going to start. Everyone in the industry, everyone in the tournaments realized that. His ownership reflected that. He ended up in the optimal lineup, but he did play a little bit more than at least you were expecting, and probably most people were expecting, and he did hit sort of a ceiling outcome at the minimum price. They have raised his price tag up to 2,400 on DraftKings. Is that enough to deter you, or how do you feel? Is he priced appropriately now?
I think his price is still too cheap. Even if I think we had him projected for what, 18 minutes today? Yeah, 18 minutes. If he gets 18 minutes, 2,400 is incorrect for Kevin Love. Uh, I think he's a great play today on DraftKings in particular.
Okay. Are you going back to him? I don't even know if you went there in the first place, but let's assume you did. Back to him at the captain spot tonight.
Yeah, he is. So my three main captains today are Kevin Love, Bam, and Jokic, and then I still have 7 to 8% of Jimmy Butler, MPJ, Gabe Vincent, and Max Drew. So I'm a little bit more spread out than I usually would be on these showdown slates. But Kevin Love, he's a good captain. I said something last time, like if Kevin Love puts up 20 DraftKings points, then he's going to be the optimal captain. He did that, but he wasn't the optimal captain. It was actually Gabe Vincent. Would have loved for it to be Max Strus in the previous game. I went back to him at captain a bit, and he was the optimal captain until like the last 30 seconds. Gabe Vincent got a rebound or made a free throw or something. But these guys are all going to be good captain options. I mentioned last time someone asked about cash options, and I said Bam, Jokic, and then Kevin Love is probably a better GPP option. I think it's the same today because we're still not super confident in Kevin Love's playing time. If you want to go there in cash, I guess it works, but I think maybe Jokic and Bam are probably better options for cash, and then for GPPs, we should definitely be getting to Kevin Love captain.
Fair enough. And great call on Struce last stream, by the way. I know you mentioned that a few times, and a lot of our members made some good cash off of that. I saw a lot of small field wins, some nice bankroll builders from people in our Discord. So great call there. On what seemed at the time like obvious shooting regression, we don't have any other spots like that tonight, do we? Whether in either direction for shooting regression.
Not really. I mean, I would say Caleb Martin is a guy who could surprise people, but it's different than what we saw about Max Strus. Like Max Strus went 0 for 9 in game one, and then he came out and hit like 3 threes in the first quarter in game two.
Yeah. And just
And so with Caleb Martin, like he can do that. He can be the guy who hasn't done anything, but I don't think there's anyone quite like Strus.
fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah, Discord was popping off in that first quarter when Struce hit a couple of those threes. Justin's in the chat. What's up? Justin says, Chuck, who is the X factor going into game 3? So whether that be for showdown or just the pure outcome of the game, Chuck, what do you think?
It's got to be Jimmy. Like I hate to say the star player is the X factor, but he has not been the difference maker.
True.
And I kind of think going back to home court, they stole one on the road. Like I think it has to be Jimmy. Like I'm still interested in Kyle Lowry. I keep talking about it, but That's a lower percentile outcome. If Gabe Vincent keeps shooting like he has been, then it's probably Gabe Vincent. But I think the player that needs to step up tonight is Jimmy Butler to ensure that the Heat win.
I mean, this seems like an old school analysis, but for an 8 seed to make it this far, you really do need everyone to pick up the slack at different times. And the Heat seemed like the perfect example of that, right? Where every single game it's a different guy who's either leading them in scoring or leading in ball handling.
Well, it's like I kind of mentioned before game one. I think the Heat, to beat the Nuggets, they just have to shoot threes and make them at a higher clip, and that's how they won game two. We kind of saw it at the end of game one a little bit. They didn't do it the whole game, and I mean, they only picked it up in the fourth quarter, really. But in the previous game, I mean, these guys were just hitting shots. Like, Caleb Martin is good for one of those just whatever threes per game. Max Strus was hitting, Gabe Vincent was hitting, like Kyle Lowry hit a couple, I think.
Yep.
So it's really hard to say one guy is going to take over. It's like it's been a full team effort from the Heat.
It really has. And you mentioned, so when you mentioned your captain options, whether the top three for cash or the ones that you have the most exposure to tonight in your own lineups, obviously you mentioned the Joker. But his price tag is up once again. It just keeps increasing. And in our staff chat this morning, we were making the comparison to a Lamar Jackson showdown slate, a Josh Allen showdown slate, where he's up 20K plus 22,800 at the captain. Obviously, different scoring, different ranges of outcomes between NFL Showdown and NBA Showdown. But just, and maybe this isn't the point, but at what point is that too high for both the captain spot? And is it possible he gets priced out at any point?
So for Jokic to be the optimal captain tonight in the winning lineup, I think he probably has to outscore whoever's in second, Jamal, Bam, or Jimmy, by like 20 fantasy points. It's just the salary is so much higher than the next guy, Jimmy Butler. And when you play Jokic a captain, like who are the last two guys in your lineup? Like Kevin Love is a given, but then you got to play like Kevin Love, Duncan Robinson, Kyle Lowry, or Kevin Love, Gabe Vincent, Christian Brown. Maybe not even Gabe Vincent. If I don't even know if that salary fits, but it just we've seen it a few games. Like Jokic can put up that 60 fantasy points, but if Jamal puts up 45 or 50, like Jamal's probably the optimal captain just due to the price difference and the upgrade you can make at the bottom of the roster. And so I think Jokic, we still want to play Jokic a captain just because he hasn't been the winning captain for a few games doesn't mean we want to avoid it. But there's certain things I think that need to happen for him to be able to be the winning captain. He has to overperform, and I think a few other guys have to kind of underperform, and maybe one of the cheap guys also has to overperform. But we still want to play Jokic and captain, at least in utility. He's in all my utility lineups. I have him about 15% at captain right now for reference. So.
And I guess the other downside is if you play him at captain, most of the lineups are going to look extremely similar, right? So if you're playing him in large field, is it just leaving salary? Is it playing one of these scrub guys that isn't expected to get much run? Like, so for example, Highsmith, who easily called out as a guy who would regress, be over-owned in game two, only played 5 or 6 minutes. Is he a guy now that tonight the field's not going to be on and maybe he plays more? Or what do you think his playing time projection range of outcome is?
Like he could play anywhere from 5 to 20 minutes. I don't think that's what they want to do. They want to play Kevin Love. They put him in the starting lineup last game. They ran him. Like the plan is to play Kevin Love unless something happens where Kevin Love's playing poorly or Haywood Highsmith comes in for those 3 minutes and just really does well. I think he's an okay GPP play, Haywood Highsmith, because his ownership is going to be basically 0. But he's more expensive than Kevin Love, so it's tough because we expect Kevin Love to start again, play 20 minutes probably. And so it's definitely a worse play to play Haywood Highsmith. But if you're playing like the big GPP on DraftKings, I can see merit to having a few percent of him. But the other player in that range too, just because we're on the cheap guys, Jeff Green is pretty interesting, a little bit cheaper than Kevin Love, and I think he's a better play than Christian Brown if you need to get a guy that cheap. No one's really going to get there, and he's still getting the playing time every game. So we do have a few options at the bottom. Cody Zeller is really the only guy I'm completely avoiding, I think. It's just even if he plays and he puts up a few fantasy points, it's just really hard for me to see him being in the winning lineup unless it's like a Jokic captain. But then again, like if that happens, then that lineup is probably going to be duplicated a couple hundred times anyway.
Right, exactly. Green's interesting because I imagine he's going to get a fraction of the ownership that Brown will get after Brown's last game. This kind of seems like a Highsmith spot where we don't expect Brown to play as much, just because you and I were talking briefly before the stream started, where he just played outstanding in that first stint, and the coach left him in there for a little bit longer than probably he anticipated, and as a result, his playing time, his minutes, and his production followed. We can't bank on that once again, so I imagine he'll be a little more overowned.
Yeah, it just I don't know. I'm not going to get there that much, but he is an option if you're willing to take that risk, I guess.
Okay. All right. We see Matt in the chat. I know Matt is someone who took advantage of the last stream, so we'll happily answer his question tonight. He says, Chuck, what are the most common builds? And we're talking from team perspectives, like 4-2 Nuggets or balanced 3 from one team, 3 from the other. And as an extension of that question, is a 5-1 build more unique because less people are playing it, and is it viable?
So most of my lineups are in the favor of the Heat. My most common build right now is 4-2, 4 Heat and 2 Nuggets players. As far as 5-1, in this, like with these two teams specifically, yes, like a showdown can end with a 5-1 ending, 5 Heat players or 5 Nuggets players, but I think there's enough guys who are appropriately priced on both sides where it just I don't know what does the game flow need to be for the winning lineup to be 5 Heat players and 1 Nugget, right? Like probably a blowout, and which Nugget would it be anyway? And so, like I said, my most common is 4 Heat, 2 Nuggets, and then after that it's 3-3, and you can mix it up a little bit like that. I don't focus too much on this. I look at the players, and then I just go through the lineups and make sure that there's nothing egregious in there. But yeah, I think the field is probably going to be on that road too, more Heat than Nuggets, and so if you want to get to more Nuggets, because the problem is if you're getting to more Nuggets, it's like you're getting to KCP and Bruce Brown instead of Kyle Lowry, Max Strus, Gabe Vincent, even Duncan Robinson. And I don't know. I think right now it kind of feels like those Heat players have a better chance of hitting that ceiling that we're looking for, I guess. But that's just how it is for the last few games. And so, like Bruce Brown and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, both still good plays that are going to come in a little bit under-owned. And so, if you want to get a little contrarian, that's one way to do it. Play a little bit less of those Heat guys I just mentioned, and play a little bit more of like Bruce Brown, KCP, Jeff Green, even Aaron Gordon, maybe.
For sure. And I think, I know Matt has been a long time member, and he, like me, probably has NFL brain turned on, where in NFL, we're thinking on slots, we're thinking 5-1 stacks, we're thinking 4-2 stacks, maybe getting weird with some 1-5 stacks. But really, that because that's so correlation based, really you're just playing the value here in NBA. And I guess Chuck,
Mm-hmm.
we don't see 5-1s that often in NBA. Really, the only scenario is already said like a blowout, or I imagine during the regular season when a team is missing a bunch of players and there are just so many mispriced guys from one team. That's probably when we see 5 guys from one team. When all guys are appropriately priced, it feels a lot more difficult for that onslaught 5-1 stack to hit.
Mm-hmm. And because the thing too, I've been talking about is minutes. We want to play the guys who are going to be on the court, and the model has Jokic and Murray both projected for 40 minutes, Bam and Jimmy both projected for 40 minutes, and then we have a bunch of guys in the mid 30s, and so it's like there's so many guys that are going to be on the court for 30 plus minutes. Vegas has this as a 3-point game, I think. Last I saw, Nuggets were still 3-point favorites. It's just there's too many guys that are going to play minutes that someone's going to do something for the teams, right? Like someone on Miami's going to do something, someone on Denver's going to do something. So like I said, I'm playing a little bit of 5-1, but I'm expecting a close game. Vegas thinks it's going to be close. I think we just want to get players from both sides. So 4-2 or 3-3 either way.
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right. We'll get out of here in a couple minutes. If you guys have any final questions, make sure you throw them in the chat. Chuck, we got the Chris Paul news right before this that he's going to be released or waived by the Suns. Initial reaction there?
It seems like such weird timing to do it on June 7th. Like I wouldn't have been surprised if it happened in a month, but I see a lot of people talking about like, oh yeah, they're just gonna stretch his, last 2 seasons, whatever, over the salary cap, and that means like he's owed 30 million over each of the next 2 seasons. The stretch provision allows you to, instead of being on the hook for 30 million salary cap next season, like say 10 million next season, 10 that season after, 10 the season after, kind of stretch out that salary cap hit. But my understanding is it can only happen if you're in the last year of an expiring contract. And so, but I see like a bunch of analysts saying that that's what the Suns' plan is. And so maybe I don't have good enough understanding of the CBA.
I mean, Christ,
But
you need a PhD to understand it just from the way you're explaining it. So,
right, and I've been like following contract stuff since I was in high school. So it's like I don't think anyone really knows what exactly is going to happen. So I want to see what's going to happen. If Chris Paul comes to the Lakers, hey, we'll take you for the veterans, man. Help us get another ring.
I mean, I didn't want to throw it out there. I figured you would throw it out yourself. So I'm glad we eventually steered the conversation in that direction. So, all right, we'll get out of here. One final question from me to you, Chuck. Which player are you the most overweight on compared to the field in your tournament lineups tonight?
Let me take a look. So I can tell you that the players that I have a lot more ownership compared to everyone else, Kevin Love, Jokic, and Bam. And then from there's a pretty steep drop off to Jimmy, Gabe Vincent, Max Strus, Kyle Lowry, Jamal, Michael Porter, Aaron Gordon. I kind of want to get over the field on MPJ. He had a bad game last game, but that's not going to happen every game. And his ownership, it seems a little bit lower than it should be. Let me refresh. It's showing 40% in the flex, 8% captain. I'd be kind of surprised if he showed up 8% captain. And so I'm probably going to have around 10% captain. That's what I'm at right now. And then I'm going to be over 40% in the flex. Not too far over. And then it looks like I'm going to be over on Gabe Vincent, too. I'm kind of surprised if his ownership comes in as low as 27%, though. And then I'm over on Max Strus. I'm basically over on all these guys. Yeah.
Chuck actually has 7 lineup spots. Everyone else has 6. That's how Chuck is able to get over on every single player on the slate. So it's a nice little trick that Chuck has there. So, all right, guys, if you have any final questions, we're getting out of here. Hop in our Discord server before lock. occupyfantasy.com/Discord. Chuck and the other guys will be in there answering any questions that you have. And come sweat the games with us tonight in the Discord channel. So make sure you follow Chuck on Twitter at ChuckSilverDFS. Follow me at Brian Jester FF. Follow us at Occupy Fantasy. Make sure you're subscribed here on YouTube to get notified when we go live, upload videos, and give us a thumbs up if you appreciate the content. That helps us out tremendously. Lets us know to continue doing these shows. So for Chuck, I'm Brian. Thank you and good luck in the NBA Finals Game 3 Showdown slate tonight.